a scumbag guy.
Laurie calls her neighbour scum.
It's the fence dispute between neighbours that's turned toxic.
I'm going to the police right now, so I dare you.
It's a bloody brawl between neighbours.
Hello, I'm John Barron and welcome to Media Watch. And when it comes to Barneys between neighbours, a current affair has seen it all. Fists, blow-ups, shouting matches and property disputes. It's all fair game for the long-running tabloid TV show which delights in showcasing people behaving badly. But it's this story from a year ago involving 19-year-old Jack Stokes which has seen Nine breached by the media regulator over privacy.
You're gonna up. Do it. Make sure it's on video too.
But it's not Jack's privacy in question, but his troublesome neighbour. And yes, we have blurred his face.
Don't touch him. Don't walk over on it. Get out of my yard. Get out of my yard. Don't touch me. I told you up. Then get out. Ring the cops.
Having filmed the dispute on a mobile phone, Jack then posted it online, where it clocked up hundreds of thousands of views. Cue ACA reporter Hannah Sinclair, who was sent to Jack's country home to ask,
"What do you make of the response you've had online?"
Jack was chuffed, and now he was on national TV to tell us all about it.
A lot of people had said to me like they thought that I was going to end up hurt. Some little 19-year-old kid, and then next minute the bigger guy's on the ground.
But that bigger guy wasn't chuffed at all with a complaint to the media regulator that Nine had breached his privacy. And last week, the ACMA agreed, saying Nine was in breach of the TV code because it broadcast the neighbour's name, part of his residential address and his unobscured face, all without consent, which the chair of the ACMA said was a step too far.
Broadcasters may only disclose personal information without consent if it is relevant and proportional to the public interest.
Nine says its story was in the public interest and it's now been viewed more than 9 million times on YouTube. And on that, the ACMA agreed. But there was a catch.
While it was in the public interest to report on the altercation, there was no public interest reason to broadcast unobscured footage of the face of the neighbour.
So, even though the neighbour came over the fence spoiling for a blue and the video was seen online around the world, the regulator says he should not have been identified on television. It's quite a ruling, and you can see why Nine was pushing back, arguing in its defence.
If Joe Blow, aged 24, started a fight outside a pub and was hit in the face but no charges were laid, Nine and every other media outlet would be perfectly entitled to report that information.
Nine also argued the privacy provisions didn't apply because the viral footage had already been widely seen. That was also knocked back. While on the issue of consent, Nine submitted,
"It cannot be the case that every person involved in a dispute in public or which becomes public must not be identified unless they give consent."
And we'd agree with that. We asked Nine what it thought of the ruling and it replied,
"We are concerned about the way the ACMA has elected to interpret the privacy provisions of the code in this instance."
Nine says it will cop the decision and train staff on what it means, but added,
"We do not consider the ACMA's interpretation to be reflective of the community position in this instance."
And nor do we. We asked the ACMA if it would have been okay if Nine had showed the vision but didn't name the neighbour. But it ducked the question, saying it doesn't deal with hypotheticals. You can read their response on our website. But now to the rise and fall of two digital darlings.
Vice is going bankrupt. BuzzFeed News is dead. What does it mean?
Well, in short, it means journalism in the digital age is as precarious as ever. Vice was once hailed as the future of online news, but last week it was on its knees.
It's an extraordinary collapse. Just a few years ago, they had a multi-billion-dollar valuation as investors looked to this swashbuckling approach to news and the young audiences it was attracting.
Vice grew from humble beginnings as a punk magazine in Montreal before reinventing itself as a digital brand with its own TV channel and reporters filing from around the world. Vice grabbed massive audiences and showed up legacy media by reinventing long-form journalism with reporting from exotic and risky locations, like the ISIS stronghold of Raqqa.
There's bodies lying everywhere. Absolute destruction. We keep having to run across streets because of the snipers.
Vice, which relied heavily on social media referrals, made its old-school media rivals sit up and reach for their wallets. In 2012, Rupert Murdoch tipped in $70 million via 21st Century Fox and asked on Twitter,
"Who's heard of Vice Media? Global success."
In 2015, Disney invested $400 million, and a couple of years after that, Vice was valued at a whopping $5.7 billion. And while Vice knew how to engage millennials in their millions, actually making millions was an entirely different challenge.
Why have they not been successful? I think you've already said it. It just shows how hard it is to make progress in the world of digital publishing, where especially when you have the big tech companies creaming off all the advertising revenue.
And no matter what Vice tried, it couldn't turn the corner, as analyst Joseph Teasdale told the UK's Press Gazette.
They tried digital advertising, sponsored content, creative agency work, TV production, but continually missed revenue targets and never hit sustained profitability.
Last week, the New York Times was issuing last rites on its former rival, calling Vice a decayed digital colossus. And just weeks before that, its hip cousins at BuzzFeed were also tolling the bell, announcing the closure of BuzzFeed News and sacking a bunch of journalists, leaving media watchers to claim
all of these outlets that were giants in the 2010s, it's over. It's just totally over.
Over already, despite being hailed as the future of the news and driving millions of hits on social media with posts like The Dress, which went viral in 2015 after BuzzFeed shared the photo on its website.
What color is this dress?
It is dividing people into two very distinct camps, white and gold versus blue and black, and the issue is taking on really a life of its own.
It was blue and black, but if that was the future of news, maybe who cares that it's gone? Well, NBC Universal, for one, who pumped $400 million into BuzzFeed and has lost a large chunk of their stake. And yes, BuzzFeed, which employed more than 100 reporters, did seek donations from readers, even backing it up with Pulitzer-winning stories like an expose of China's treatment of the Uyghurs. But in the end, just like Vice, it couldn't pay its way. And when Facebook changed its algorithm in 2018, demoting news content for posts about family and friends, its distribution model was crippled. And that's a real problem when your skill is making stuff go viral. As New York journalism academic and author Jeff Jarvis told Media Watch,
BuzzFeed took its content to people where they were, on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. The problem is that there was no barrier to entry for making clickbait. Everybody else copied BuzzFeed, and Facebook and company had to downgrade them all. BuzzFeed News never had a business model.
And according to Aileen Gallagher, a former editor for the New York Magazine, the landscape is not getting any easier.
Digital media companies are suffering from a cascade of revenue shortfalls, falling ad revenue, a fundamental change in the ways audiences engage with digital content, and the financial consequences of rapid expansion. The ad revenue won't come back, so companies needed to find new revenue sources.
And therein lies the age-old problem. How do you make journalism profitable online? And the answer to that is both simple and challenging, as Joseph Teasdale told Media Watch.
Right now, the most viable model is to find at least some people who are actually willing to pay for your product.
Easier said than done. Vice will now be sold to the highest bidder for as little as $225 million, a far cry from the billions it was once worth. The Sydney Morning Herald says there will be no change to Vice-branded content available here on SBS and Nine's pedestrian news site, but, as it points out, the company that emerges from bankruptcy will be a much smaller media player than it once was. But now to racism in the media and the terrible toll it's taken on one of Australia's most prominent journalists.
ABC boss apologises to Stan Grant after host left Q&A over racist abuse.
Last Friday, Stan Grant said that he was stepping down as host of Q&A following criticism over his role in the ABC's coronation coverage, including a discussion on the impact of colonisation on Indigenous Australia. Grant says that he's had enough of the grotesque racial abuse aimed at him and his family, and in announcing his decision to walk away, he took aim at ABC management for not supporting him.
Not one ABC executive has publicly refuted the lies written or spoken about me. I don't hold any individual responsible. This is an institutional failure. I was not the producer nor presenter of the coronation broadcast, yet every newspaper article accusing the ABC of bias has carried my image. I am writing this because I will not have people depict me as a person of hate.
The ABC's coronation coverage has received more than 1,700 complaints. At the time, we said it was a brave discussion to have. However, with guests arriving at Westminster Abbey, we questioned the timing. But ill-conceived or not, absolutely nothing excuses the racial and violent abuse Grant has been copping. Managing Director David Anderson says he's dismayed that Grant has been subject to such sickening behaviour and that he has the ABC's full support. In an all-staff email sent Sunday afternoon, Anderson wrote,
"The ABC is never above scrutiny or criticism. However, the nature of the anti-ABC reporting from some commercial media outlets is sustained and vitriolic. Stan Grant has stated that he has not felt publicly supported. For this, I apologise to Stan."
It's a tragic outcome for Grant and the ABC, which for now loses a talented journalist. And you have to ask, could his role at the ABC have been better handled? Grant has been a prominent broadcast and print journalist in Australia and overseas for decades. He's also frequently called on to be a commentator on world affairs and Indigenous issues. But why, as critics ask, does the ABC allow Stan to combine opinion, some would argue activism, with his duties as a high-profile ABC host? Or, as the original Media Watch team of Stuart Littlemore and David Salter wrote in the Herald,
the problem is the immediate and immediately obvious consequence of journalists and their opinions.
So, does it matter that Stan Grant has been supportive of the Uluru Statement or reckoning with the monarchy in his latest book, while also hosting a program such as Q&A, which also discusses those issues? ABC management points out Grant has never been found to be in breach of its impartiality guidelines. But that ignores the fact that for many ABC viewers, any opinion expressed by its hosts, even if it's based on personal identity and experience, as Stan's often is, can be a turn-off. The ABC's managing director says there will now be a review of how the organisation responds to racism affecting its staff. And that's critical, because Stan's role and identity has left him exposed and feeling unsupported. But perhaps the ABC should also review the way it encourages some of its star journalists to walk the impossible line between news, analysis and opinion, and whether that is in line with public expectations. We wish Stan all the best for the months ahead. And finally, to some shock news from down on the farm.
New research.
Aussie adults don't drink enough milk.
97% of Australian adults are not meeting their daily serves of dairy.
And that new research made its way onto Seven's Melbourne Bulletin that night.
New research suggests Australians aren't drinking enough milk.
And Seven was up bright and early to milk it again the next morning.
New research suggests that Australians aren't drinking enough milk.
While over at the Herald Sun, the headline writers were having some fun.
Hey, wait a mo, is that enough milk?
Surely that should have been wait a moo. They also had a nutritionist describing the finding as very alarming and warning readers
these people could be missing out on a range of health benefits and would be likely to suffer from poor bone health and osteoporosis as they age.
And where did this alarming dairy data come from? Rather close to home is the answer.
A study from Dairy Australia.
Aha, from Dairy Australia. And what about the nutritionist quoted in the Herald Sun to back up the findings? Turns out they were also supplied by the industry group. And this happy family of milk lovers with their full glasses and milky grins? Yes, that's Anthony Batty and his two daughters. He's a member of Dairy Australia's marketing team. The Herald Sun didn't tell us that. And on Adelaide's 5AA, the milk delivery kept coming, along with that all-important statistic.
A study from Dairy Australia shows upwards of 97% of adults, we can probably round that up to all adults, aren't consuming enough to meet their daily requirements.
So where does this 97% figure come from? We couldn't find it anywhere, and we soon found out why, with Dairy Australia telling Media Watch,
there was a discrepancy in the way the statistic was communicated.
Whoops. Turns out that 97% figure refers to the number of Australians who are not aware of how much milk and dairy they need. Quite the discrepancy. And it's not a good look that it was uncritically reported and promoted using voices from Dairy Australia, which says it's asked journalists to correct the record. But congratulations to Nine's Weekend Today for making some effort to cut through the spin.
Is this the end of the almond latte?
Okay, well, we've just got to be careful because the research has come through from Dairy Australia, so they can be a little bit biased.
Right.
At last, some independent thinking. Well done, Doc. Something 97% of the media could do more of. And that is all from us for tonight. You can read more on our website, including a statement from Dairy Australia. And don't forget Media Bites on Facebook, YouTube and Instagram. But for now, until next week, goodbye.